We welcome you just a little bit late to episode number 94. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you a little bit later than expected to episode number 94 of the Primetime Rundown alongside Mike Szabo. I'm Joey Jarzynka. We did have a little bit of a traffic issue coming down here, and as you can see, just behind me that way, we are in Atlantic City. We are at the Caesars Hotel in Atlantic City, but the main reason why, there is a little bit of a backstory. So it's not because, we just felt like going to the sports book because of the New York Yankees tonight because they're playing Seattle, but we did combine it with some other work. But Mike Szabo back home in Middle Village, Queens. Mike, good to see you, sir. You are done with your vacation. How are things with you?
Doing well. Great getting back to vacation. Felt it was good vacation. Good to get out a little bit down to South Carolina. Good to be back home. So I see now we've swapped of who's home and who's out and about in the hotel rooms this week.
There's no doubt about it. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to episode number 94. Keep in mind, of course, our show is presented to you by Black Cats NYC. Be sure to download their newest album called Free Cake, which is out now. Play loud on the following music platforms: Apple Music, YouTube, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, YouTube Music, Pandora, and Spotify. Mike, we have a fantastic show on tap with us. We, of course, have a writer from SB Nation's Windy City Gridiron for the Chicago Bears. Jeff Berkes will be with us here today. That'll begin at 7:45. And, of course, we cannot thank Jeff enough. We'll be thanking him as well when he does come on, that he was able to move his busy schedule around due to the fact that we were sitting in traffic. So we do appreciate that, Jeff. And of course, at 8 o'clock, the writer for The Athletic covering the Minnesota Vikings, Arif Hassan, will join us around 8:15 from the host of the Hurry Up podcast with Mac Robinson. He covers the Cleveland Browns. He'll be with us as well. And of course, concluding our show from 8:30 to 9 will be our good friend from NCAA College Hoops Digest, Josh Adams, who is, mind you, a Baltimore Ravens diehard fan. So in this episode, we will be covering and previewing the NFC North as well as the AFC North. And also, ladies and gentlemen, too, the Detroit Lions lead writer for SB Nation will be with us, Jeremy Reisman, on Thursday evening. So please be sure to follow us on social media to ensure that you have all of the updates for our upcoming instant reaction segment on Thursday night. And that will, of course, be back home. Mike, let's get right into it. And of course, we do have a few things to discuss. We will have the Chicago Bears to discuss. We're going to have a lot of good things to talk about here with the NFC North. There's a lot of movement around. There's the training camp. Training camp had just started and etc. But let's begin, of course, with one little topic here, of course, and we always want to talk about the New York Yankees because they have been skidding. Tonight they're out in Seattle. They're losing. They've lost 5 straight, and they were swept by the St. Louis Cardinals. Not a good look.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this team, it's just not what you want at all. This is really, I mean, in short version of how I'll say it, it's really, you can just see it that the Yankees really just have an internal mindset of taking their foot off the gas. And this is how they really approach this time of year. Usually the last couple of years in particular, you really see the end of July through most of August and really take a dip in terms of their win pace and really the product on the field and whatnot. And of course, none of the players are really ever going to admit this or whatnot, that there's a taking the foot off the gas, but you can clearly hear a little bit of the innuendos and the quotes, and certainly Anthony Rizzo, who's out once again with lower back tightness, that there is this sense of, hey, let's just get healthy. We'll manage the regular season from here on out, whatever it is. Let's just get healthy and get ready for October, which some people can appreciate, but you still have 2 months of the season to play out, and they really just have not looked good. It's not really been 2 weeks or whatnot. This has really been almost 2 months of baseball where it's really been disappointing 500 level. So you could take a little bit of margin of error here and there given how good they started out, but it's really starting to be time to pick things up again.
Yeah, and something else too. They're also 20-20 in their last 40 contests. And if you look back at it, Mike, you say to yourself, well, Jordan Montgomery was traded 1-for-1 for Harrison Bader. And, obviously the latter is out due to a lower body injury for the most part, or for the latter part of, or much of, excuse me, can't get my words right, for the most part of August. So they expect him back in September, which is a good thing, obviously, because a lot of people say, and even Adam Wainwright on Fox did say on Saturday night that Harrison Bader is one of potentially the best center fielders, defensive center fielders in the entire game of baseball, which says a lot. But in the short term, you obviously got a chance to see that the Yankees are still struggling in the pitching department, and Jordan Montgomery made them pay on Saturday.
Yeah, I think really the two starts against the Mets and the Royals a couple of weeks ago really shadowed over the fact that, it steered Yankee fans away from the fact that he's been a really reliable starter the last couple of years for the Yankees. I mean, who really off the top of your head is really consistently eating the innings in the starting rotation the last couple of years for the Yankees? It's been Jordan Montgomery. And sure, he's not ace. He's not an ace level pitcher or number 2 level pitcher, but he's certainly one of the better 3 or 4 pitchers in your rotation in the league. And, he really puts out a consistent performance other than the Mets and Royals starts a couple weeks ago. He never really gives up more than 3 runs in a game. So they traded one of their more consistent starting pitchers while also keeping guys like Severino on the injured list to build them up and whatnot, trading a lot of their minor league depth. Where, okay, you traded all of that minor league depth, you traded a reliable innings eater. Now, how do you get from now till October? The calendar doesn't just magically flip. They have to be able to get out there. And Domingo Germán, for all the hate he gets, including from me, he certainly held down the fort on his own for now.
He really did.
It's really going to be a struggle. They sent Clark Schmidt down. It's really unsure how much of a shot he's going to get. So who's really going to be eating these innings while the rest of the starting rotation is really struggling? Garrett Cole is getting shelled left and right. Jameson Taillon, for the better part of a month, has been really bad. Nestor Cortez does his job really well, but he's not going to shut out a lineup, give you the 6 or 7 shutout innings or whatnot. So certainly the pitching rotation is a massive concern. And like we said on the instant reaction last week, I always thought that trade for Montgomery was really weird from the beginning. The more I think about it, the more I read about it, the more I see how this team is performing after the deadline. That trade is just downright bad.
Yeah, it's definitely possible, and it's also very bold for you to say that too, because we still have yet to see Bader get into a game. So
Bader's going to be a great defensive glove. Don't get me wrong, but you're certainly not going to see it for the next month and a half. And where's the state of the Yankees going to be by then? And certainly for the lineup, they need more offense. Bader's not going to give you that. He'll be a great glove, but certainly not going to plug a lot of the holes. And in the short term, not a great move right now. In the long term, Cashman hope it really pays off in October.
Well, we definitely will. We shall see, because there's also some pitching. Obviously, Luis Severino, who is out on the 60-day injured list. He was also taken aback by that because he thought that he was almost there. Frankie Montas did not look that great on Sunday, but I could tell you this though, Mike. There's a lot of talk, obviously, all around Major League Baseball that the New York Yankees, they're up however many games. They're up by 9.5 games. In the regular season. And, there's another team too that really was supposed to be better than where they are now. And that is the Chicago White Sox. And very funny enough, we bring in Jeff Berkes, who, is in Chicago and whatnot and covers the Chicago Bears. But, Jeff, first off, thank you very much for being accommodating with us here. We truly appreciate it. But, you look back, and I just want to throw in a Chicago White Sox reference. I'm sure on the south side of Chicago, folks are not too happy with their performance either.
Oh, my dear God, you're starting me off with a baseball question? No, guys. I am football only. I don't know anything about baseball besides what's on my fantasy team, and I don't have any socks. I don't have any Cubs, so sorry. I can't
For a
help
good
you,
year
man.
not to watch them right now.
Yeah, they're bad teams.
Exactly. Well, Jeff, ladies and gentlemen, writer for SB Nation's Windy City Gridiron, who covers the Chicago Bears, Jeff Berkes. Jeff, thank you so much for joining us. How are things with you out in the Windy City?
Yeah, great. I don't actually live in Chicago. I'm in Iowa, but
Okay.
I was just in Chicago recently, and it is I can report still beautiful and still full of wonderful and delicious food. So when you guys visit next, you'll be taken care of.
Oh, I love that. That's fantastic. Jeff, obviously with the Chicago Bears, there's so much to talk about. There's, of course, second-year quarterback in Justin Fields, who's going to be the backup behind him, not Nathan Peterman. And then obviously, first-year head coach Matt Eberflus as well. That's another big deal. Former defensive coordinator in Indianapolis, and for however long I've been alive, and obviously for as long as Mike has been alive too. The Chicago Bears have been a defensive-minded team, and that's really what they've preached for however long. For starters, I want to start with the offense first and Justin Fields, because his progression towards the latter part of the year looked pretty decent in place of Andy Dalton. And I got to tell you, it looked like there might be some issues with Allen Robinson. He's no longer there, obviously. And now there's also that hole, but we'll start with Justin Fields. What do you think with him?
I mean, exciting player. The Bears were lucky to be able to get him, to be able to trade up for him in the draft. A series of kind of crazy events led to them being able to move up with a swap. And Dave Gettleman, of all people, made a trade down. I mean, that never happens, right? And so there were a lot of crazy things that happened in that draft to be able to get this prospect in Chicago. To the likes of which that they haven't seen since Johnny Lujack in the 1940s. I mean, we're talking about a premium quarterback prospect that just has not happened in Chicago. I think that if Jacksonville would have taken Justin Fields number 1 overall, I don't think a lot of people would have really questioned them. I think that he was an incredible prospect, and at some point through the process, something just happened. So did he get a fair shake under Matt Nagy last year? Absolutely not. When we were at camp last year, he wasn't even taking any reps with the 1s. All of his reps were with the 2s. And so when he did enter game early in the year, he was very unprepared. But he was unprepared because he wasn't given the reps to be in any sort of state of readiness. And so his year last year has to be taken with a big chunk of salt. You can't really think that the Matt Nagy offense was competent because it was static routes and it was dead on arrival. It was a bunch of, it's a collection of plays more than anything. And so you have to take whatever you see in terms of overall stats with a grain of salt. That's just clear and simple. He's now the unquestioned guy. He has a real offensive coordinator who comes from a real offensive system. And in Luke Getsy, he worked with Aaron Rodgers over the last few years. So he comes from that Shanahan-esque offense. He also has a deeper background in other stuff. So it's not just Shanahan stuff. And so right now it's kind of like rookie year part 2, or a redshirt freshman year, whatever you want to say. Yeah. And so I'm really excited about it. He looks confident. The days that I was at camp, up and down, but again, it's a new offense. Offensive line has been shuffling every single day. New receivers, the only receivers that he really has any rapport with built up from last year's Darnell Mooney and Cole Kmet, the tight end. And those guys both look good, right? But, these things take time. And I would say overall, I'm happy with where he's at. And, let's see. And the whole city of Chicago is behind this guy.
Yeah. Well, I mean, when you look back and you say to yourself, really, when was the last time that Chicago has had a true number 1 quarterback? They tried obviously with Mitch Trubisky. That simply did not work. Then you go back before. Jay Cutler didn't work. Kyle Orton didn't work. The list goes on. So, I mean, I'm personally pulling for him outside of, over here on this side of the country. Cause it's tough to see the Bears, not do well for really ever since the double doink. I
don't understand. I thought we were going to be friends. And all these you're just slinging arrows at me from the very top, bad baseball teams. And, you're listening to all the quarterback heartbreak. Come on, Joey, what are we doing here?
I'm sorry, Jeff. And you know what? Then it's probably not too late to say, just to put the cherry on the cake, that I am an Eagles fan.
Oh, well, there you go. That's what it was. Now it all makes sense. Yeah. You guys throw snowballs at Santa Claus. I get it. All right.
Exactly. And boo him too. So my next question for you before we get over to Mike is, you brought up the Darnell Mooney emergence, and you brought up, he's potential, or now I guess the number wide receiver one, if you will, because now, unless you might see something different with, the Byron Pringles, the Tajay Sharps, and N'Keal Harry, low risk, high reward type trade there. But really, the way that Chicago and the Bears, the way that they built up their tight ends too. Jesse James, another one behind Kmet too. Is that correct? Or
he was on the roster last year, but I don't think
last year. Okay, yeah. So forget that. Just even by looking at the wide receivers, who do you see as a potential wideout number two?
So I think the pecking order in the passing game will go Darnell Mooney number one, and he emerged last year. Like, he took on the lion's share of the targets last year. Allen Robinson was on the team, but he just sort of faded out into the background. And Darnell Mooney really did lead this team last year, and I thought looked pretty good doing it. So I'm not worried about Darnell Mooney with the top share of targets on the team. I think the number two option on the offense is going to be Cole Kmet until I see otherwise. I know a lot of Bears fans are kind of down on Cole Kmet. They think he's, maybe a mid kind of player. And that's fine, but he's in his year three season, and a lot of tight ends take that long to kind of develop and break out. I'm willing to wait and see if he breaks out. I think he's the number two target right now. I think Equiminius St. Brown is likely going to be a factor. I think he wins that job as the X receiver. I think he'll be on the field a lot. Brings the familiarity with Luke Getsy coming over from Green Bay, and any kind of Notre Dame connection Bears fans get pretty excited about. I think half the Bears fan base is Notre Dame fans, so that's a pretty easy sell for a lot of Bears fans as any Notre Dame guy. So I think that those three are probably going to see pretty significant share of the workload. I think the rookie Velus Jones is going to really dominate slot reps. I think Byron Pringle has not looked very good in camp. I haven't heard a ton of really great reports out of Byron Pringle. Maybe he's a gamer. Maybe maybe he'll pick it up. Maybe he'll find his role in the offense. But those two, I think, are going to go back and forth in the slot. But Velus Jones looks really, really fun. And I know he got a lot of crap for being an old rookie. Maybe he looks like he's real. Like, I'm not saying he's going to be an all pro or anything like that, but he looks like he's ready to contribute, which you can't say about every rookie.
Yeah. And pretty much, and is it fair to say, just to follow up on that, sort of like a veteran presence?
Well, I mean, he's a rookie still, right? But he's a mature rookie. Like in the mini camp, rookie camp, he shows up, he's in a suit. Yeah. Right. He's showing up to meetings. He's taking notes. He's just taking this very seriously. And I think he's just at that more mature level than you would get if you were 21, 22 years old coming into the league. He had to fight for what he got. He had to transfer schools. Yes, he had like some advantages by staying around for like the 7 years, right? A lot of people go to school for the college for 7 years kind of thing. Right. But he benefited from that by playing himself into a draftable slot. And I think he's showing that he can contribute right away.
Mike Szabo, take it away.
Hey, Jeff, thanks so much for coming on once again. Just to stay on the offensive end, I know you spoke about now how Cole Kmet will probably be the number two option. We did hear about N'Keal Harry getting injured over the weekend and possibly having a serious ankle injury. How big could this potentially be for the Bears trying to take a flyer on a guy who's supposed to be a first-round talent in New England, and really trying to figure out, in terms of the wide receiver position, who can contribute other than Darnell Mooney? How big of a blow could this be?
So I think that the last I heard was high ankle sprain. So usually that's generally like kind of a 4 to 6 week kind of deal, but you never know based on individuals gonna vary on that. I think that he was, if you're going to be optimistic about N'Keal Harry's chances, he was fighting with Equiminius St. Brown for those reps. Yeah. And I think that Equiminius St. Brown had the inside track and he looked better in the practices that I saw. There were a couple plays that Harry made. He's very impressive looking. He's a physical specimen. And so you look at him, and I think that's a lot of coaches fall in love with the athletic body type that he presents in a jersey. But I don't know that it translates all the time on the field, right? And that's why he's not in New England anymore. It might take time for him to get up to speed. Honestly, an injury might be in some way fine, because he certainly wasn't being counted on for reps early at that point. I think ESP was going to be the guy there, but it might give him a time to kind of relax, learn while he heals, and maybe another guy can make the roster for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Mhm. Also on the offensive line side of things, last year was a really bad year for the Bears offensive line. Of course, allowing 58 sacks last season. We saw offensive tackle Tevin Jenkins return to camp on Saturday. How much of an impact can he provide for, and really could really help the offense if this offensive line gets a little bit more solidified?
Yeah, that whole situation is pretty wild. I don't really know what's going on with Tevin. Obviously, he came in with some back issues, had a surgery last year, came in late in the year, got a couple of starts. And his first start didn't look very good. He played pretty well against the Vikings. That's kind of the very short 2021 report on Tevin Jenkins. Came in, looked like he was going to have an opportunity to solidify one of the spots, likely the right tackle spot, and then woke up with something. That was what we heard. Woke up with something on the first day of camp, and then he just hadn't practiced until, like you said, until recently. And so, what is it? Is it a physical thing? Is it a mental health thing? We're all kind of left questioning that. We're not really sure exactly what Tevin Jenkins is all about. In the meantime, they were giving number one reps to the 5th round rookie Braxton Jones at left tackle. They were giving number one reps to last year's 5th round pick Larry Borum on the right side, and then they go out and they sign veteran Riley Reif to take one of those spots. To me, it seemed like he's going to be the left tackle. Braxton Jones will learn from him. And now Reif's taking snaps at right tackle with the ones, and Braxton Jones is back with the ones on the left side. And so you have an interesting position where the new regime, they drafted Braxton Jones. Now, is he a 5th round talent? I think he's a better than a 5th round talent. It was just a very big draft class. And so is Braxton Jones the guy that can win the starting job at left tackle? If that's the case, if that's who they like best, they signed Riley Reif for $10 million. He's going to play one of those spots. They're not going to sign him to have him sit on the bench. And so Tevin Jenkins might not have a spot. He might not have a role. And so I don't really know what's going to happen. He's going to have to look better than Braxton Jones to push Riley Reif back to the left. It's for him to take the right. So he has a climb ahead of him. He has to climb above Larry Borum. He has to climb above Braxton Jones for him to see the field. I'm just not sure it's going to happen. They might slide him down into guard. I've heard fans speculate or speculate about that, but I haven't seen the Bears do anything of the such. So I don't know if he's going to be on the field this year. And if he is a big hulking physical presence. So if he can get everything physically and mentally right, he can certainly impact the offensive line. But will that happen? I mean, I wouldn't bet on it.
So that's interesting, given the fact that he was 39th overall pick just a year and a half, almost 2 years ago.
Last year, but it's with a different regime.
Mm-hmm. So
that's a sunk cost.
Yeah, so now, of course, as you mentioned, different GM, different head coach. Since, that transitions us perfectly to my last question with the head coach. And what's the biggest difference you've really seen now from 1 year to the next? 2 different training camps, obviously, last year with Matt Nagy, this year with Matt Eberflus. What's really some of the big impressions you really get from camp and how he's running things?
Yeah, I'd love to spend an hour just throwing dirt on Matt Nagy's coaching grave, but I think that the biggest thing that I've seen is the Eberflus principle, the HITS principle, which is all about hustling to the ball, bringing intensity to practice, whatever the T stands for, toughness or something like that, and then playing smart, right? And so you could see it from the first practice. He got on people that weren't going 100% every play. Now, sometimes that can go a little far if you take it too far into the season. These are pros. That wears down a team. They can turn against you if it's not going the right way in the win column. But I think that he's bringing a level of accountability and a level of intensity that should excite all the Bears fans that are around, because it's very different than what we saw under Matt Nagy, which was more kind of laid back, let guys get away with stuff. And so that's the biggest difference that I've seen. It looks like he's holding the players accountable.
Oh, that's something now. And you know what? We've seen that a little bit too. Like, some of the, accountability, we're finally seeing that, as opposed to some of the, I don't want to call it the country club type, type atmosphere where it's, they don't give the accountability via any press conferences or anything along those lines. But it sounds like it's, they're going to be rewarded with tough work and positive work and, wins, hopefully. But my last question for you, it's very tough, Jeff, because when you say to yourself about this offensive line, there's another one that's in there, Lucas Patrick. He was a free agent signing from Green Bay too. Is he potentially a dark horse, or do we expect him to take one of those guard spots?
Oh, he'll play center. He's hurt right now. So he hurt his thumb in a practice that I was at. Actually, I think it was the second practice. And so he's out. He had like quick surgery on that. But he'll be back, I think, hopefully by week 2. I think he will miss a game, but he is there to play center. They made that pretty clear from the start. I didn't believe him. I honestly, I was like, yeah, okay, you say that, and then you're going to go out and you're going to draft a center, and you're going to say, well, he was the best player on the board, so we kicked him over to guard, whatever, right? Didn't happen, right? They brought him in to play center. They're very clearly putting him out in front. Like, he's been the guy that they send out the press conferences. He's the guy that they put in front of people to say, like, hey, look at these new guys that we're bringing in with this new attitude. And so he is absolutely in their plans to play the pivot.
Well, that's definitely something to watch out for. Jeff Berckes, ladies and gentlemen, writer from SB Nation's Windy City Gridiron for the Chicago Bears, Jeff Berckes. Jeff, thank you so much, and we cannot wait to have you back on and possibly throw a couple of more jabs there later on during football season. It should be a ton of fun, and we can't thank you enough for being on here tonight.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, absolutely. We will see you soon. And that will, of course, bring on Arif Hassan. And Arif, thank you so much for joining us. Writer for The Athletic covering the Minnesota Vikings. How are things up in Minnesota?
Yeah, generally pretty optimistic. I think most people here are pretty happy about the direction of the team. Obviously, people are really excited about the offense, right? Because you got an offensive head coach, you got a new system coming in, a lot of new wrinkles. But I think also kind of the defense is going to be interesting. I don't know if they'll be good, but certainly it'll be a different look for the Vikings than we've seen for decades, even because they hadn't run the 3-4 in about 40 years. So it should be fun to kind of see how it plays out.
Mike Zimmer gone after a whole bunch of years. Kevin O'Connell in now. Big difference, obviously, we would assume with training camp. I'll take one out of Mike's playbook there. Obviously, Mike Zimmer, a defensive-minded head coach. Now Kevin O'Connell, an offensive-minded head coach. Talk about the differences that you've seen in training camp early on here in the first 8 days of August.
Yeah, sure. Some of the differences probably don't tell us much about, how much of a quality coach Kevin O'Connell is, but certainly there's been, a different approach, right? And I think some of it is just, you kind of shedding, the old environment. You've got a new environment. You had a couple of disappointing seasons, and, regardless of who that coach was going to be, there's going to be a little bit more energy, a lot of, stress lifted off of people's shoulders, right? So I think just kind of having that new environment helps. But, there is, the buzzword that everyone uses with new coaches is collaboration, to the extent that, you can genuinely see something like that happening from our side. It certainly looks like that is something that they're incorporating. I mean, players from, quarterbacks, receivers, backup receivers, offensive linemen, they're all offering input. And that input seems to, give the Vikings feedback, right, in terms of how that offense is designed. And, Mike Zimmer would have, I think, a bit more back and forth than people would, I think, assume, especially among the defensive players. But I think that there was a lot of less flexibility because once he makes a decision based off the input that he got, that would be the decision that he makes. And I feel like that doesn't seem to be, the nature of the way the coach-player dynamic works here. So there's a lot more, I think, enthusiasm about the way things are happening here. Again, they haven't lost a game yet, so we don't really know what the team culture is going to be like until that happens. But for the most part, it looks pretty positive.
Yeah, I mean, and you bring up about the positivity part, and I don't mean to throw a wrench into the positivity party here, Arif, but the thing to a lot of folks out here, and especially, we are in NFC East territory, and a lot of the grumpy Commanders fans, they're trying to, they're looking for something to get on, and obviously, a little bit out here, even in the New York area, we continue to hear, oh, Kirk Cousins, he's not living up to this contract. He simply can't get over the hump. Again, is he that playoff caliber quarterback, and is he worth all of this money? How does he look in training camp now with obviously another year in Minnesota? Can he get them over the hump?
Yeah, I don't know that he can get them over the hump. That's just kind of my feeling on who he is as a quarterback. But if I were to go off of training camp performances, I mean, he looks pretty fantastic. I think this is, from a performance standpoint in training camp, the best that he's had so far, not just, from play to play, which I think we're seeing a lot more in terms of big plays coming from him, which has always been, I think, an underrated strength of his. But also, when they put him in situational drills, he's done a lot better. I've been to a ton of Vikings training camps where they end every practice with a 2-minute drill or some other type of situational where the offense needs to score points, the defense needs to stop that from happening. And, there were 2 years in a row, not last year, but the prior 2 years, where Kirk Cousins in training camp did not win a single 2-minute drill, which I think reflected itself into, the regular season that kind of built on that reputation. I mean, it was brutal. I think the 1 year, they continued that all the way into regular season practices. He didn't win a single 2-minute drill until like week 7 or 8 in practices. I mean, it was just brutal. This time he's won every single 2-minute drill I've watched except for one, right? And some of that's a little bit of luck, driving your offense down to set up a 52-yard field goal that your kicker happens to make. That's not, miraculous or anything like that. But, it's good to have on your record. And it was just yesterday, or actually 2 days ago, where, he couldn't set up the winning touchdown. But for the most part, I mean, that is a qualitative difference in the way that he's playing, the way that he's reacting to situational drills where, that's a known weakness of his. It's one reason that people talk about his inability to bring the team over the hump. So in terms of, his camp performances, in terms of what you'd expect from him, in terms of, how accurate it is, how many interceptions he's throwing, and whether or not he's creating big plays, all of that generally looks good for him in this training camp.
Okay, well then again, I hope that you didn't excite some Vikings fans or help, just say, oh, maybe this could be the year,
yeah,
but,
right.
But who knows, because he still has obviously that shiny toy in Justin Jefferson, but we'll get to him in a few seconds. Mike, go ahead, take it away.
Hey, Arif, thanks so much for coming on once again. I know Joey just mentioned him with Justin Jefferson, and you got some really great offensive weapons there in Minnesota, but of course, we'll start off with some bad news, and of course, you had the injury news to tight end Irv Smith Jr. I just looking over some of the articles you came out with and recently, what are some of the options or what's some of the directions really that Minnesota can go or where they should really go at the tight end position?
Yeah, the plan right now, at least as it's been communicated to us, and of course, coaches and general managers like to deceive reporters because it allows them to deceive the rest of the league. But the plan, as communicated to us, is to kind of move forward and have sort of a committee approach to replacing Irv Smith. The value in having a starting tight end is that they're versatile; they can do a lot of things. And for Irv Smith, he's a very good blocker, and he's a very good deep downfield pass catcher, right? And he's getting better in terms of his intermediate route running and those sorts of things. Now, there's not another guy on the roster that can do all of those things the same way. If they were, the Vikings would be a 2 tight end offense, right? I mean, that's just a very valuable skill set to have. So it seems like they want to, mix in the fullback CJ Ham, who's got, the capability to do tight end things. And he's more athletic than most fullbacks. He's been able to generate some big plays. So they'll throw him in there. They'll turn some sets that have 2 receivers on the field into 3 receiver sets and have KJ Osborne or Adam Thielen operate basically as a blocking tight end on a crackdown, something along those lines. And they're both very good receivers for that. They obviously also have backup tight ends, right? Johnny Munt, for example, is primed to take on the starting tight end role in a situation where Irv Smith would not be available. Now, they do expect him to be ready by week 1. That is, in my estimation, I'm not a doctor, but in my estimation, based off of looking over the league history of similar injuries, slightly aggressive. It sounds like he should be back at least by week 2, if not week 3, but they're targeting week 1. So we may not even have to have this conversation about who can come in and replace Irv Smith, but I'm sure they're scouring the waiver wire. They have worked out a tight end here. They obviously haven't signed any. I'm sure they're looking at kind of the free agents. Jared Cook is, for example, a name I would keep an eye on because of his familiarity with the Rams offense. But, they might be looking at the trade market. The unfortunate thing is there's a lot of teams that have drafted multiple tight ends that would therefore have some tight ends on the trade market, but those tight ends just kind of don't fit what the Vikings need. Primarily guys like Trevon Wesco, who's a blocking tight end, which the Vikings have one with Ben Ellefson. They don't need that. But, they might take a look at, what options are available out there. So I would, kind of keep my ear to the ground and see what's happening there.
Could be something else. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and just to keep the similar theme with the offense, we among all these really great weapons, of course, now having a offensive-minded coach in there, we've seen in years past really the Vikings' approach to offense and their offensive creativity in the playbook really be criticized. What are we seeing so far in terms of how the offense will change and really improve in 2022?
Yeah, no, I think that creativity is going to be kind of the first thing that strikes people about this offense. There's certainly a lot of different things that they're doing. Some of the stuff they're cribbing directly from the Rams, because why wouldn't you? They just won the Super Bowl, right? But it makes sense to me. Stuff like jet motions and sweeps to kind of confuse the eye discipline of linebackers. That's going to be pretty common. They're experimenting with different ways for wide receivers to attack different gaps off of those. They're experimenting with bunch sets, motioning into and out of bunch sets, which is going to create some defensive, coverage, defaults, right? They'll force the defense to go into kind of their own defensive audible, and many times you can predict what those look like and be able to attack those. They're also just running plays out of bunch sets, which of course leads to, things like pick plays, yards after catch plays, deep shots based off of, flooding zones and stuff like that. And they're also, moving players around. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised to see, a running back out wide, which we saw a little bit in OTAs. I wouldn't be surprised to see a fullback out wide, or a tight end, lined up at the fullback position and running a route up there. We saw Justin Jefferson last year score a touchdown from the running back position as a receiver. I wouldn't be shocked if they experimented with some more like interesting formations where you've got unique angles for a receiver to run a route or a tight end to run a route and create unique matchups. I mean, to me, this seems like a team that wants to hunt matchups more than they want to hunt concepts. And so I think that that's going to be kind of the theme. And if that's the way that you approach it, you're going to hopefully have some creative solutions to getting playmakers into space.
Yeah, that's something else too. And obviously with, Kevin O'Connell and his experience as the offensive coordinator for the Super Bowl winning LA Rams, and having so much, so many fingerprints all over Cooper Kupp's, his amazing season, record-breaking season, all of the above. Hopefully he'll be able to do it with Justin Jefferson. But but Arif, my next question to you, though, going on to the defensive side of things, Danielle Hunter, who it's just been such a rough couple of years for him, 7 games last year, none in 2020. How has he looked in training camp? Because obviously we're all hoping, and I mean personally I am, because that defensive line at one point with Everson Griffin prior to his mental health issues was so stacked. And Danielle Hunter's really one of the only leftovers from a few years ago. How does he look?
Yeah, I mean, he looks great, right? It looks like he's never had an injury. Obviously, last year, the injury that he had that kept him out for basically half the season, a little bit more than half the season, was a pectoral tear. Those injuries don't tend to recur. They don't tend to impact performance going the next year forward. You just have to, be able to do rehab appropriately. And so from that perspective, it looks fine. When he came back from the herniated disc that he had 2 years ago, the Vikings defense, for those 6 or 7 games that Hunter was fully healthy, the Vikings defense was basically a top 5 defense, maybe 6th or 7th, depending on how you account for it. They were actually performing extremely well, even if you include kind of the end of half collapses that they became famous for. So Hunter was a big part of that defense. He looked really good then. He looks very similar, I think now. He looks like he's playing the kind of football that he's become known for. So certainly a prime elite athlete that has explosion, that has agility, that has all of the elements and tools that you'd expect somebody who's trying to chase, Defensive Player of the Year award.
Now, another draft pick that I want to discuss here, safety from Georgia, Lewis Cine, number 32 overall in this past year's draft. There have been a ton of Georgia Bulldogs obviously selected in the first round. Save, I guess, I don't want to say the best for last, but does he look like, that they picked somebody like a first round talent from Georgia?
I want to be optimistic the whole time, but, frankly, no. I'm not worried about that fact, right? But that's not what it looks like to me. I remember Harrison Smith coming in back in 2012, what he looked like as a rookie, and that was really astonishing stuff. Now, in order to kind of give it context, I said the same thing about Justin Jefferson, his rookie camp. It was unspectacular. There's a reason he didn't start the first 2 games his rookie year. He just wasn't having a very good camp. The same thing is true of Lewis Cine. And so I'm not worried about Lewis Cine That's just not what he looks like right now. That's just kind of the fact of the matter. He's running with the twos. I think that's just kind of a rookie thing. He needs to kind of pick up the defense. The thing is, right now he's doing something that you don't pick up at all in his Georgia film, which is that he's a little bit late, right? He's hesitating a little bit. He's a little bit late. And one of the things that made him such an excellent defender in Georgia was that he was, extremely quick. He knew the play before the offense knew the play, right? He knew exactly where he needed to be, which allowed, his preternatural athletic ability to kind of take over. When you combine really good instincts with really good athleticism, you get picks and hits, right? Like you've got a really great safety that's got the ability to be everywhere. Now his athleticism is showing up for sure. They're having safeties, actually, the thing Harrison Smith was famous for in the Mike Zimmer defense is to line up at the line of scrimmage as if he's blitzing and then somehow find a way to cover deep downfield as a lone center fielder. He's got the capability to do that. And he's done that a little bit in practices. So that's not, the concern. The thing is, as soon as he picks up kind of all of the responsibilities that he has on defense, as soon as he kind of figures out what the zone handoffs are, as soon as he figures out kind of how we can attack certain quarterbacks who are a little bit late throwing the ball, he'll be fine, right? I'm not concerned about him. But, right now he doesn't look like that guy. And the good news for the Vikings is they drafted him while they also had a starting quality safety next to Harrison Smith in Cameron Bynum, who is now running with the ones with Harrison Smith. And so if it takes a little bit of time for Lewis Cine to get online, I think that's fine because they've got a really high quality set of starters right now. But I wouldn't expect him to have a big impact right away. And if he does, I'll eat my words. It's fine. It's okay watching fun football players, even when you're wrong.
That's definitely very true. So one more question from Mike, and then we'll bring in Mac Robinson, who covers the Cleveland Browns. Mike, take it away.
Yeah, so last question for you, Reef. Really going to the Vikings overall, we certainly talk about maybe the defense probably will determine a lot of this. What's really the expectations for this year, your win-loss prediction record, and really like around the NFC North, is this really this anticipation that maybe this is probably the best opportunity in the last couple of years to dethrone Green Bay at the top?
Yeah, if you take if you take Devontae Adams' loss seriously, which makes a lot of sense, he's the best receiver in the NFL, and add in the fact that Marquez Valdes-Scantling is no longer there, and you kind of discount the impact that rookies might have. Right. You take a look at a receiving core that's just not completely there. And the last time Aaron Rodgers lost his top receiver was Jordy Nelson. He struggled a little bit. Right. It took him a while to get back to kind of the elite level of production that needed that he needed in order to be kind of, an MVP quality player. That said, it's still Aaron Rodgers. Right. So there's still going to be, I think, the fact that Green Bay is the favorite. I think nothing I've seen in camp kind of moves me away from that, even though this is mostly positive. I just think that, the Vikings need to kind of prove it before I can, fully buy into that. But yeah, this is the best opportunity they have. And certainly it looks like they'll have the horses, right? Whether or not the coaching is going to be there to bring them the rest of the way, whether or not some of the players that we expect to perform well actually do perform well, I don't know, right? It looks like they've got the fundamental talent to be able to win the NFC North, but I just don't think that they will right now. I think that the Green Bay defense has a lot of pieces that are fairly underrated. I actually do like that receiving core. It's not great, but it's got a bunch of really good number twos on it, I think is the way that I look at it. And I think that's going to be enough, right, for them to be able to pull out a win. So for me, the Vikings are second in the NFC North. To me, that's a playoff berth still. I think that's probably 10, maybe 11 wins, but certainly not 12. And probably a first round exit. I don't know if Vikings fans would like that or not like that. It's I don't know where they're headed with that kind of prediction, but I'm hitting the over on 9.5 wins, and I'm expecting a playoff berth, but I'm not expecting anything kind of meteoric.
Well, hitting the over. That is definitely what Caesar right up there likes. So Arif Hassan, ladies and gentlemen, writer for The Athletic covering the Minnesota Vikings. Arif, thank you so much for joining us here tonight on this Monday evening. We truly appreciate it. And good luck the whole year for the Vikings. And we hope to have you back on sometime during the season.
Absolutely. This was fun. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Arif. We'll see you soon. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let's keep on rolling here and let's bring in Mac Robinson. Mac Robinson, good to see you, sir. Host of the Hurry Up podcast with Mac Robinson, covering the Cleveland Browns. Good to meet you, sir. How are things on your side of, or rather, Cleveland's not that far from where we are. So, yeah, I was going to say, you're probably about, 500 miles to our west. So you're not that far. So how are things in Cleveland?
As good as they can be, I think is the best way to put it with the way that it's been going on lately, especially. Normally a lot of times Browns fans kind of have like the hope of, this is going to be the year. But at the same time, I can't even give you a win-loss record. Like that's what I feel kind of bad about, because I don't even know who the starting quarterback is going to be midway through the season. We obviously had the Deshaun Watson, the ruling come down, the NFL appeal that. So I don't even know really what's going to be coming down when it comes to that. But I mean, Jacoby Brissett versus Baker Mayfield week 1. Let's go ahead and see how that goes.
Well, you know what? Now that you brought that up about how, really no one has a clue with what's going to happen. Are we going to have to bring out the Bud Light refrigerators again in a couple of years or no?
I don't think that. I don't think we're going down that road, because I can, a little aside for you, I went to camp that year and I was covering training camp, and I swear to you, if it weren't for Jeff Risdon, I would have gotten smacked in the head by a Brock Osweiler pass at the outside. And that's not even a lie. That's not even a lie. Risdon's like 6'5". He was able to bat that away from me. But that's the kind of, terrible. I think that's an understatement at this point, quarterback play that I've seen. I joked earlier today that, the veteran options that some teams have dealt with. I dealt with Jake Delhomme one year. And then that same year, that went to Seneca Wallace, which went into Colt McCoy. And so, yeah, trust me, I get it. But I mean, it could be a hell of a lot worse. I've seen a hell of a lot worse, but I'm all right with Jacoby Brissett for right now. He's definitely not the worst I've seen.
That is very true. New England and Indianapolis fans can definitely attest. Well, Mac, let's get into this. And you brought up about Deshaun Watson, and you say to yourself, Jacoby Brissett. They also signed Josh Rosen, of course, Arizona Cardinals legend Josh Rosen. Of course, we have to make sure we include that. To be the pair of backups. There's obviously a lot of distraction, we would assume, around training camp now. What's the vibe around camp, especially for a lot of unknowns, and especially for some of the players like a Jadeveon Clowney, like a David Njoku, who just signed a contract which now gets completely overlooked. A lot of these players had hoped, and especially Kevin Stefanski, too, the head coach, that this can be the year. They got Watson, they got whatever, but now there's just so many distractions. Kareem Hunt as well also requested a trade. And of course, according to Cleveland.com, privately said no, the Browns did. So it just seems like there's so much distraction. Do you agree or disagree on that?
Partly, yes, but I will say this, that throughout the entire offseason, obviously there's been, the Watson suspension looming and what could possibly come down for him. But at the same time, it really seems like the locker room has been pretty unified for the most part on, it's been honestly more of a positive vibe this offseason, which is kind of crazy to, envision. But, it seems like a lot of these players are a little bit more aligned, and they feel like, the vibes coming into, this training camp has actually been better than we've seen in previous seasons. So I think that that's interesting for one. But two, even with, Deshaun Watson, whether or not he's in the game or not, they kind of look at Jacoby Brissett as that kind of calming presence, even though he's not the most vocal guy. He's somebody who, they still have that trust and belief in. And that's what, a lot of the players have been vocalizing to, the media and, throughout practice as well. So, in getting a chance to see these guys, I think it's been interesting how that's kind of played out as well. But honestly, again, I think once the Baker Mayfield trade went down, I think that some of that distraction kind of, I don't want to say went out the window. Obviously, you mentioned Kareem Hunt, and, that's definitely something that, has to get worked out behind the scenes. But, at the same time, Andrew Berry, in a lot of these contracts that he's been able to do, whether it be giving somebody a little bit of a raise, maybe adding in some of that dead money at the end of the deal, some of the void money, I should say. He's been able to kind of finagle this salary cap to this point and still create a little bit more cash while also making sure that everybody's happy at this point.
Yeah, it's and you talk about the happy part too, because, we remember David Njoku was not too happy either. And then all of a sudden, pretty much quietly, or at least on this side of the country, it was a little quiet. We didn't hear much. I can't attest for Cleveland, obviously, where you are, but it pretty much went quiet on that front. And, eventually he backtracked. They franchise tagged him, and then he signed a brand new 4-year deal back on June 1. And then all of a sudden they made so much of an investment in Austin Hooper. Now he's gone. He's out the door. And now Njoku's in. What do you see that maybe, brought that on?
Well, for one, with David Njoku, the biggest gripe about him coming into the draft was the fact that, obviously he was this athletic specimen. He was one of the youngest, if not the youngest player in the 2017 draft. Yeah. And so for him, once he came in, he wasn't much of a blocking tight end, except the last 2 years now, he's really improved on that end. And to be honest, the last 2 years, he's been the best blocking tight end in the Browns tight end room. And so now at this point, he kind of took over that lead tight end spot anyway at this point, and you're kind of waiting to see that leap. And especially, when you look at somebody like Deshaun Watson, who, again, made 34-year-old Darren Fells into one of the biggest red zone threats in 2019. Just imagine what he can do with somebody like David Njoku with his athletic ability. Right. So, you pair that up. But the other side of it too, you mentioned Austin Hooper. Obviously there were very high expectations, and he was one of those players who was about the same age as Njoku when Njoku signed this extension this offseason, when he did sign in Cleveland. Just for whatever reason, him and Baker just were not able to kind of get on the same page. And it really seemed like a lot of those big plays that you saw down the field just weren't really clicking here in Cleveland. And so it just kind of looked at a situation like, maybe it's time to move on, give Harrison Bryant a bigger load, which he was taken in the 4th round in 2020. Have to see what he has to offer at that point, and more of that H-back second tight end role. But I think that they're expecting David Njoku. I think it's more of a belief in that as well. And you mentioned very quietly originally with that trade request, and then all of a sudden, last offseason says that he's willing to do the extension. Right. The big thing that was kind of left by the wayside, maybe overlooked by a lot of people outside of Cleveland, was the fact that, he previously had Drew Rosenhaus as his agent. And then Drew Rosenhaus was the one who requested the trade, said that Njoku wanted out. Second, that Stefanski gets in. And finally, Njoku understands what it's like to be in this locker room, understands what it's like to be around these guys and stick in the city. Then all of a sudden goes back to his original agent who he had left prior to Drew Rosenhaus. So then at that point, tune was changed and he said, I want to be in Cleveland for my career. So all of a sudden, then you see that extension kind of get done this offseason. And while some were saying it was a little bit more expensive than they expected for Njoku, given his recent productivity, but at the same time, I think the Browns are betting on him being in this system, constantly making that improvement, and also the fact that he just turned 26 years old a few weeks ago. So for him having that age upside and going forward with that athleticism, I think that they're kind of betting on that upside.
Well, Mike Szabo, take it away over there.
Hey, Mac, once again, thanks so much for coming on. And really, we talked about the Njoku situation. Does that really give them confidence about how they can go about handling Kareem Hunt's trade request? And just when it looks like, there's going to be issues in that running back room, does that situation really with Njoku really give them confidence that this is all going to be just settled and they'll still run ahead with their great 1-2 running back dynamic with Hunt and Chubb?
I think so. I think so, because I think with Kareem Hunt, whether it be, if Andrew Berry has to, give him a little bit of a raise or give him a little bit of money to make sure that he's okay, I think that's fine. I think the players in the locker room, they understand this is a business. And so for Kareem Hunt, obviously he has the off the field issues that he had previously dealt with in order to land in Cleveland in the first place. So for him, I think it's a situation where, yes, he took a bit of a discount to stick around here for a couple of years. Again, 2 years, just under $14 million that was signed in 2020 to stick around. So at this point, I think that for Kareem Hunt, it's, hey, I took a little bit of a discount for you guys to stick around here in Cleveland. I'd like to get a little bit more of what I deserve, because I do still think that even though Kareem Hunt is a quote unquote backup, they utilize him in a big pass catching type of a role. And he's still viewed as one of those top 10 running backs, in my opinion, talent-wise across the board. So, I think that for him, maybe giving him a little bit of financial gain, at least right up front. That way he's all right and taking care of that. But I do think that it's going to be all right between those two because, again, Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, even though most times you might think somebody's going to be wanting more carries, at the same time, I do think that both of them, they have a strong enough relationship off the field that I think that they understand that, look, it's not anything, personal or anything like that. It's just a situation of, hey, you know what? Like I have to get my money and make sure that I'm able to earn as much as I can, especially at a position like running back where it's as difficult to kind of keep that money coming in.
Well, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, also just really to bounce off something that Joey and I have been talking about on the show in the last couple of weeks, and really, should they do this, should they not? Even though they had, with all the Watson uncertainty, and maybe Jacoby Brissett can be a competent backup, but given the expectation really in Cleveland, should they go out and trade for Jimmy G, who, I mean, he's not the greatest, but we know his win-loss record is there and can be able to fill in for a while should the Browns make that move to cover until, this Watson uncertainty is settled? Would they have him later on in the season and whatnot?
It's going to sound like a cop-out answer, and I apologize, but it really depends on the price. I mean, when it comes to Jimmy Garoppolo, I mean, people talked about Baker Mayfield's price tag being high. He was at $18.5 million. Jimmy G's at 26. And I know on the air in Cleveland, I had previously said, I basically called Jimmy Garoppolo Instagram stunt food, where, it looks great and, it looks all well and good in the Instagram posts and everything like that. It's probably not good for your health. And, the one statistic that really stood out to me was, seeing pop up on the graphic, I think it was like, oh, the Niners are 14-3 when he doesn't throw a touchdown pass, which I think that some people took that as like, oh, that's a really great benefit for Jimmy Garoppolo. He does a good job. For me, it's just telling me you can have anybody out there at quarterback and you're doing fine. Like, yeah. So Jimmy Garoppolo, yes, he's a good game manager, and I'm not denying that. But at the same time, if the 49ers are asking for a third or a fourth for the guy, and he's going to be coming in at maybe $8 million this year, I don't necessarily know if I want to go ahead and do that if I know for a fact I'm going back to Watson anyway next year. So, how much am I willing to pay for this year when, to be honest, I think that his ceiling caps out around what you would have had with Baker Mayfield in the first place.
That's something too. And how you brought up, obviously, next year they're going back to Watson anyway. But something else too is that, obviously they look at, I guess the what was it called? Trying to come up with the word, Mike. The appeal, of course. The NFL was trying to appeal the 6-game suspension, and there's a possibility now that it could be more, could be less, whatever. Well, we expect it to be either 6 or more, right? But let's just say if it's more. Jimmy G is a free agent at the end of 2022. That's another thing, too. So how much can you really get if you're San Francisco? But, I mean, if Cleveland, again, if the market is drying up for Jimmy G, and if, let's say, they are desperate to get something for him, does it make sense? Now I'll ask you this question. Does it even make sense to get a Jimmy Garoppolo with those numbers that you just presented to us now?
I think that, honestly, I think that it all depends on what your expectations are for him. Yeah. Because, again, if you're bringing somebody in like a Garoppolo at this point in the offseason as well, that's the other point of this as well, is the fact that, I mean, look, normally by this point, you're adding expectations on a win-loss record for the year, let alone, hey, here's a new playbook. Go ahead and get this entire thing down, possibly be the starter, or maybe we bring you in midseason. At that point, if I'm the Browns, maybe I see how Jacoby Brissett plays out, and then maybe I go after a Jimmy Garoppolo, depending on what his salary and what he's willing to do salary-wise going into the year. Because I believe the amount of guaranteed money that he actually has for this year is around $2 million. So if he's willing to, maybe bring that down for the year, then I wouldn't mind it at that point. But it all comes down to expectations, both from, the fan perspective, from the team perspective, and especially Jimmy Garoppolo's perspective. Yeah. Because if you have somebody in Jacoby Brissett who's been here all offseason, who's been taking reps, with that offense and everything like that, what is his expectation going to be going into the season?
Yeah, that's definitely a good point, for sure. Next thing for you, Mac, is Jadeveon Clowney, who last year had a fantastic season with Cleveland. And we remember back in 2020 when he was with Tennessee, it was a disaster. Granted, he was injured. He was playing injured, and now he comes back. 24 tackles last year, 14 games played and started. 2 forced fumbles, big deal. And then obviously back in 2020, we look back at those numbers: 14 tackles, 1 forced fumble. He was injured. Only 8 games played. All of those were starts. How big of a piece is Clowney to this defense after years of him being this prized trade piece, and now it's very on the low end for Clowney. He's not the player that he once was. Can he get to that old Houston Texan form in Cleveland?
I think so. He's been massive for Cleveland. And I would say this, it's rare to find as perfect of a fit opposite of Myles Garrett. That's the one thing that the Cleveland Browns have been trying to find, especially, they had Emmanuel Ogbah, who they selected in 2016, fit well, and then John Dorsey traded him off. But at the same time, between him, Olivier Vernon, and then you get Jadeveon Clowney. Clowney has that athleticism that you want, but more importantly, he has the power as a pass rusher, and he has that power when it comes to some of his pass rushing moves, and that fits well opposite of Myles Garrett, who obviously utilizes his strength, but also his speed off the edge. But when it comes to Jadeveon Clowney, and especially Andrew Berry looks for somebody who can also stop the run opposite of Myles, and so Clowney, that underappreciated trait that Clowney has, everybody looks for the sacks out of him. But that underappreciated run-stopping ability really comes in perfectly and beautifully in that Joe Woods defense. And so for Clowney, opposite of Myles Garrett, I think it's a fantastic fit. And you also look back at his time in Houston, the best years that he had was when he was opposite of J.J. Watt. And when those guys were able to kind of play off each other, J.J. Watt obviously taking a ton of the attention, Myles Garrett has that similar effect on the opposite side where offensive linemen, they're adding in, a double team with the offensive line and they're still chipping with the tight end. So, you always have that attention surrounding Myles, which frees up a lot of, moves where, you have Clowney able to kind of go inside, maybe take advantage of some of the guard play. So at that point, Clowney, he's been a phenomenal addition. And I do think that, the addition of Deshaun Watson in that locker room, the previous history that those guys have, I think that also helps. And the fact that Clowney and Garrett were able to kind of get on the same page last year and really play well off each other.
Another thing too here, we look back at someone obviously that was injured too, and a big part of the offensive line in Jack Conklin, who we expect for him to come back, returning from injury. And what Jack brought to Tennessee was obviously a lot of fandom, obviously, but now we're seeing really his role come into play here. And now with the likelihood of a backup quarterback, most likely being Jacoby Brissett, coming in to fill the void at quarterback. How crucial is Jack Conklin making his return for this backup QB that really needs some help? And keep in mind too, we recall from when Jacoby Brissett was in Indianapolis, that O-line was an absolute disaster. So, he's all about these, disastrous O-lines, and it's just like almost wherever he goes, it's disastrous. But can it be different if Jack Conklin can come back and show up that right side?
I think so, because honestly, and it might sound like a no duh type of thing when it comes to Cleveland, but their offensive line, it's far and away the best thing that Jacoby Brissett has had in front of him. It's almost similar to what Allen Robinson has dealt with when it comes to quarterback play. This year finally gets the best that he has in front of him, or throwing to him. Now with Jacoby Brissett, you have Jack Conklin, who can be an all-pro talent at right tackle. You have Jedrick Wills, who dealt with a lot of injuries last year, and I think kind of slowed some of his progress. I'm expecting a lot of big things out of him this year. But at the same time, on the interior, between Joel Bitonio and Wyatt Teller, you have 2 all-pro level guards. And then also Nick Harris, who played very well against the Green Bay Packers on Christmas Eve last year. That offensive line under Bill Callahan, Brown's offensive line coach, I think really has done a good job, and really has done great when it comes to, pairing up, this offensive line together along with this quarterback play. And I think with Jacoby Brissett, obviously he's a little mobile. He's not, he's not going to be Lamar Jackson for you, but at the same time, he's able to, be around in the pocket. He's able to kind of move around a little bit. And I think that the Browns are able to do very well on the offensive line. But at the same time, if he does not play, you have somebody like Chris Hubbard who's coming back off of injury, who can be that fill-in right tackle. He's that swing tackle for them. And they also took James Hudson in round 4 last year, and he's been somebody who's been able to, by the end of the year, come in and play pretty well for the most part, although he did have a few hiccups here and there towards the end of the year as well. But I do think that when it comes to Jack Conklin, if he's able to, be himself and be fully healthy, I think that far and away, this is the best offensive line Jacoby Brissett has ever played with.
Yeah, well, that is something that is telling also. We will see if he can, if they can figure things out and get it going. And if Conklin can come back and, and really return to his Tennessee form and what he was last year before injury, things could be looking positive. My last question for you, Mac, before we welcome in our good friend Josh Adams: Amari Cooper in, Jarvis Landry out. Could be, we expect, I don't know, better locker room presence, if you will. I mean, you hear Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham Jr., locker room chaos. Now with Amari Cooper and being the wide receiver number 1, how good does this look for Jacoby Brissett, and possibly also, well, not possibly, will be Deshaun Watson as well?
Yeah, I think that Amari Cooper is a massive addition for Cleveland. Especially looking at what this team has been kind of eyeing. And, everybody talks about, GMs will never divulge anything. They won't tell you anything. It's nothing but coach speak. Honestly, if you genuinely listen to what Andrew Berry had to say throughout the offseason, you always hear buzzwords. Last offseason, it was versatility. This offseason, especially around the wide receiver position, it's been nothing but separation. It's been separation and route running. And Amari Cooper is one of the best in the league when it comes to running routes. And also at the same time, when it comes to separating, he's one of the best. And so adding in somebody like Amari Cooper, I think he's able to separate much better than Jarvis Landry. And while, yes, Landry, even though there was still kind of the chaos off the field, obviously with Baker and everything like that, I do think that Jarvis Landry is still beloved in that locker room. And honestly, with a lot of players, Odell is as well. So I look at Jarvis Landry, and yes, I think that his leadership will be missed. But at the same time, Amari Cooper is one of those guys who leads by example. And so getting a chance to see him come in, he's very similar to Nick Chubb, honestly, where, he's somebody who just puts his nose down, always comes in ready to work. But at the same time, he's somebody who really excels when it comes to his position. And I think that he might have been lost a little bit in Dallas in the shuffle because of Michael Gallup, because of CeeDee Lamb, obviously CeeDee Lamb really kind of breaking out last year. But I think that Amari Cooper coming in on natural grass where he doesn't necessarily have to worry about, the AstroTurf and everything like that, I think that he's going to be able to really take his game to that next level and kind of show a little bit more of what we saw in Oakland than what we saw in Dallas as well.
That's definitely something. Another thing to keep our eyes out too is, possibly we might be seeing the resurgence of Oakland's Amari Cooper. Who knows? Mac Robinson, ladies and gentlemen. Mac, thank you so much for joining us. Host of the Hurry Up podcast with Mac Robinson, covering the Cleveland Browns. Mac, we can't thank you enough for joining us here on this Monday night, and we hope to have you back during football season.
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to come on. Thanks for having me.
All right, Mac, you have yourself a good night.
Thank you. You too.
All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, now just to put this into perspective here, I 100%, not only is this show the reason why it started late, my fault. The reason why also Josh Adams is a little bit tardy is not his fault. It is my fault. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, it is my fault. And everybody, please chant something that starts with an A and ends with an E, and you can pretty much fill in the middle. And I think Josh knows what I'm talking about. We hear it at ballparks a lot, when umpires, and I mean, in what me and Josh do, we hear it together at Seton Hall games. You know what I'm saying? So we hear that too. So all joking aside, though, Josh, good to see you, my friend. How are things just north of where I am?
Hey, Joey, Mike, good to see you guys. It's everything's grand. I'm always happy to come on the rundown and talk with you guys some Baltimore sports. It's my niche, and I'm happy to do it. I was listening to the Cleveland preview previous to this, and okay, hope springs eternal in the off season. But it's been an interesting sort of journey that the Ravens are going to be on this year, considering Lamar Jackson still doesn't have a contract. and it's getting kind of weird down there from what I understand. So there's a good possibility that this could be the final year that Lamar Jackson's wearing a Baltimore Ravens uniform. It's a possibility now.
Well, the good thing, though, and obviously there's nothing good that comes from that, but there is one little inkling of, I guess, hope, is that there is somebody behind him that could potentially make a fantastic, if not one of the NFL's best duos, in Tyler Huntley, just behind Lamar Jackson. Now, obviously, you don't want to hear that, Josh, and any Ravens fan does not want to hear that. But when Lamar was out hurt, we saw what Huntley was capable of. And again, last year, they looked really well, or really good with the injuries that plagued them. You had guys from the top all the way to the bottom on both sides of the field, on both the offense and the defense. And that included, obviously, Lamar Jackson, and Tyler Huntley was able to come in. The distraction, obviously, that you bring up, where Lamar is not playing with a contract. There is Tyler just behind him. Do you see that potentially, could be a distraction as the season rolls in, which in about, I don't know, give or take 27, 28 days?
Well, I don't think I would compare Lamar Jackson to Snoop Huntley to when you were a kid, you'd go over to your friend's house and they would have Hydrox cookies instead of Oreo cookies. And they'd go, it's just the same. And you go, nah, they look, it's kind of the same, but nah, Oreos are just better, dude, and Lamar Jackson is so much better than Tyler Huntley. He did come in and perform admirably in Jackson's absence. And played great against the Packers. They only lost the Packers by 1. Played great against the Rams. They only lost to the Rams by 1. The season 8-9 for that team with the amount of injuries that you spoke of, and we could go into the injuries. It was like they were cursed last year. They basically lost every single All-Pro on their roster at some point in time last year. They were looking like Super Bowl contenders through week 6, 7. They beat the Chargers 34-6 in October. And you thought to yourself, man, this team could make a Super Bowl run here. And just injury after injury started piling up. And for them to kind of really stay in the game against teams like the Packers and Rams, who are in their own sort of playoff hunt, is really says a lot about the organization and the way kind of Harbaugh has a sort of brings that next man mentality to the whole entire team.
Yeah, it's truly amazing to see. And again, you brought up the injuries, and, we obviously, I know for you as a Ravens fan, you don't want to go back into it and really be reminded of it. But again, for those that don't know, Marcus Peters, J.K. Dobbins, Gus Edwards, Tony Jefferson, Ronnie Stanley, that is just the beginning of that list. And yet the Ravens still went 8-9, ladies and gentlemen. It's amazing to see that, you brought up that next man mentality. They have it. They excelled at it. And then on top of it, too, they then went out, they signed a whole bunch of guys. They released Derek Wolfe. They re-signed Calais Campbell again. And then all of a sudden, they traded Hollywood Brown to Arizona, which I'm going to throw this one to Mike Szabo, because the wide receiver room in Baltimore is, again, full of nobodies, if you really look at it, for the non-Ravens fan, Mike.
Yeah, it's really interesting that, I know Josh will attest to this, how much Baltimore's really been a run-heavy offense for so long, and ever since Jackson came into the league. But you figure at some point they got to have some diversity in the playbook. They've relied a lot on Mark Andrews, the great tight end, but now, and Hollywood Brown was your one really good wide receiver that they could really count on to make a big play. Now he's gone. How much they're going to rely on Rashad Bateman to really live up to his first-round pick potential right away here in year 2, and who's really going to be behind him in this wide receiver spot that you expect at some point has to really contribute.
Well, Mike, it's something that everyone's kind of bringing up in Baltimore right now. It was kind of very much of a shock to, I think, Lamar Jackson when they traded Marquise Brown in the offseason. Lamar kind of, I think, had the doo-doo emoji and the question mark emoji after that trade. And Brown wanted out, and they made the trade, and they got a first-round pick, which they turned around and got a center for, which was badly needed on that team. As so far as Bateman has showed flashes of brilliance last year. He really is the sort of prototypical, say what you will, Brown had a lot of key drops last year, but Bateman seemed to be a very sure-handed, could be number one wide receiver in the NFL. I mean, he was drafted very high in the first round. And aside from him, I mean, we can't discount how good of a tight end Mark Andrews is and how much of a weapon Mark Andrews is. He's a top 3 tight end in the NFL, maybe top 2 if you look at the stats. So you have Andrews, you have Bateman, who they're counting. And the brain trust at the Ravens has given me no, I don't doubt them. I mean, year in and year out, you go, this doesn't make any sense, but year in and year out, they're a pretty damn good franchise. So they're counting on Devin Durnay and James Prochet, 2 guys who got a little time last year in the wide receiver to kind of step up. They've been on the team, 2 or 3 years. Aside from that, they signed Sammy Watkins, I believe, late last year. I imagine they're going to sign someone like a Will Fuller, someone like that. Maybe Odell Beckham also, who's just coming off ACL. These are always possibilities for the Ravens. They are very good about signing veterans at the last minute coming into the season. So I wouldn't be surprised if a veteran gets signed right before the training camp breaks.
And we also saw too Des Bryant as well. We remember
exactly.
that experiment too. I want to get back to Mike in a second, but just to kind of follow up on that. In terms of the question marks around the wide receiver position, is there too much pressure on these unprovens that could potentially, force some certain things? And I don't want to say force injury or force too much pressure on the Dobbins of the world, of Mark Andrews, of Gus Edwards, because we already know that the other positions are solidified, and the Ravens running back room is one of the best and really deepest in the entire NFL. But, with these unproven guys, we did see, as you brought up, Rashad Bateman did have some, flashes. That potential wide receiver too could be, Devin Duvernay. We don't know. In the early going, if we don't see Bateman live up to the first round potential, is there panic in Baltimore? What do you see as a fan?
I don't particularly think there's going to be a panic as long as Lamar Jackson is behind the line in the center. What Greg Roman does as the offensive coordinator, like him or hate him, and God, on Ravens Twitter, boy, do they hate him more often than not. They run a heavy pistol type offense where they'll have the one key factor that another injury we didn't mention, and he doesn't put up big numbers, but he's a huge part of that offense, is Nick Boyle.
Yeah.
He's one of the best blocking tight ends in all of football, and he's back. So that he's sort of the linchpin of kind of how the running game goes. And when you and today Dobbins made his return. He today was his first day back from his ACL from last year. So he's back. He was on the physically unable to perform list, but he came back today. So he'll be ready week 1, hopefully, although he tore his ACL last preseason. So I assume they're probably going to sit him out till week 1.
Oh,
but
yeah.
it is such – they have – with Ronnie Staley hopefully coming back from his ankle and performing at an all-pro level. I mean, it's a very, very heavy run offense. And when you have Lamar Jackson, who's, in the open field is as good as any running back in the NFL. Yeah. There's not a lot of pressure on the wide receivers. And that's kind of the reason why a lot of free agent wide receivers don't kind of look at Baltimore either, because they know they're not going to kind of get the numbers that they would get in other offenses that are in this day and age. It's a pass first type league, but the Ravens are sort of old school, and they behind Dobbins and Gus Edwards, who's also going to be back hopefully by week 1. They have 2 capable all-pro running backs with Lamar Jackson behind there with a solid offensive line, and that 14-2 in 2019 was that offense pretty much. So they're hoping to sort of run that back a little bit. And when it works, it works. It really does. I mean, you can't stop it. You can't focus in on Dobbins and give Lamar free reign to hit a 70-yarder right into the end zone. So there's not a lot of pressure on the wide receivers, I don't think. But in an ultimate world, would you want 2 All-Pros as your wide receiver? Of course, but it's just not that offense. And as a Ravens fan, you just kind of accept that.
Yeah, Mike, take it away.
Yeah, Josh, I think the one big thing really that doesn't, or it feels like it doesn't get talked about as much as we'll get closer to the season, the fact that Lamar Jackson is going in, basically in his walk year, so to speak, and how it's sort of such a unique situation in the NFL. You really don't see, you draft a quarterback high, you extend them fairly, with plenty of time before you ever get into a situation of, re-signing them in free agency or giving them the franchise tag or whatnot, unless something massively goes wrong. How unique of a situation this really is, and how tense, I guess, must Baltimore fans be, and what the possibility maybe could be, depending on how things go. Could there be a mid-season extension announcement?
It's unique, Mike, and it's absolutely valid when you see the kind of contracts that Kyler Murray got with the Cardinals and the kind of contract Deshaun Watson got with the Browns. These are the type of contracts that obviously Lamar Jackson is asking for, if not more. And he's acting as his own agent, which it's like the old if you represent yourself in court, you got a fool for a client, like one of those things. Like you got. I think if he actually had an agent, working behind the scenes, I think they probably would have got something done. But it is very odd, and I don't know how this plays out, because I thought he would have gotten signed by now. And that's not to say that there couldn't be a midseason exception, but it doesn't, I don't know if Steve Bisciotti, the owner, wants to just kind of go down there and just say, hey, here's a blank check, just fill in what you think is fair, and we're just going to roll with that. I believe in Lamar. Lamar has had a remarkable run in Baltimore, and I believe that he deserves a giant payday. I think that he, even with an MVP under his belt, I think he's still very underestimated as an NFL quarterback, and maybe the team is doing that as well. But I would take Lamar over Kyler Murray. I would take Lamar, especially over Deshaun Watson, he's not even going to play for the first. He's set to make his debut against the Ravens in late October. So, we're talking. This is the NFL. This is a year-to-year league. So, I know the signing bonus is going to be big, but just as a show of confidence, I would think they would have really kind of hashed this out by now. So, it seems that they're not even in the same kind of ballpark with each other either. So, again, if this doesn't get done by the end of training camp, by the end of the preseason, I very much in the camp that I think he might just walk after this year. So it's good, but I think he's really going to show out this year as well, because obviously, he's got something to prove. So it could be a great year, but also like a year where you just kind of, you see kind of the Grim Reaper with a sickle, like behind this year, going, enjoy it while it lasts, because after this year, we're going to have to start from scratch from quarterback again.
Unreal. Mike, go ahead.
Yeah, I guess just one last thing for me. Really, what would your win-loss prediction really be for the Ravens this year? We obviously know such a loaded division, where the Cincinnati Bengals just made the Super Bowl. The Cleveland Browns obviously want to look to take a step up. And, of course, the Pittsburgh Steelers, even with all their issues with Mike Tomlin, they always seem to just hang in there and be that pesky team. What's really the expectation, or what really is your win-loss prediction for Baltimore, and how far can they go this season?
Well, I think that the AFC North this year is weaker than it was last year. Especially when it comes to the Steelers, they're going to either have Mitch Trubisky or Pickett as their starting quarterback, and I can't foresee them doing much in the way of improving over last year. You know, the Ravens only won one conference game last year, was against the Browns. They were swept by the Steelers, and they were swept by the Bengals. They were mollywhipped by the Bengals last year in both games. That's why they went out and they got Kyle Hamilton in the first round, standout safety from Notre Dame, who's been wowing everyone. He's one of those players that the Ravens just seem to get in the draft where they go, how the hell did the Ravens end up with this guy in at 15 or 16? And they got him specifically, to make sure that because Jamar Chase was just burning them last year for the Bengals. So it's all incumbent on injuries, but they should be making the playoffs again with a healthy Dobbins and a healthy Edwards and a solid defense with everybody back, with Jefferson back, with Campbell, Odefe back, and they should be. I'd say 12-5. I would think they start out against the Jets, so that's always a plus. Yeah,
well,
5 minutes away from me, they open up this year, so it's nice.
Well, I'll make sure that I place that bet downstairs for you in a few minutes after it's all done. But, normally we would end off with that, Josh, but you brought up the next thing that I was actually going to say, which was about Kyle Hamilton being that first-round draft choice. And now with a pretty much hanging around in purgatory, Mr. Chuck Clark, where does he go? There's a lot of rumors that he could be on his way out. They also signed Marcus Williams, too. You also have we expect healthy Tony Jefferson, too. Could he get back to the Arizona Tony Jefferson that we once saw? And then where does that leave Clark? Pretty much negative margin of error. Do you expect him to be on the roster week number 1?
I would think so, judging by how many people in the secondary they lost last year, and the fact that Clark was one of the guys who really stepped up and played well. From all I read about Clark, he's one of the best team, most well-liked and best team players out there. So I would think, he could go with. I'm sure Wink Martindale would like him in New York. So that'd be a spot for him for sure. But the old Ravens defensive coordinator. But I expect Clark to be there. You can never have too much depth at secondary in the NFL, and they learned a harsh lesson about that last year. And I would expect Clark to definitely be on the roster. I don't think they're going to get rid of a guy like that. I neglected to bring up they also signed Justin Tucker to a 4-year deal today to make him the NFL's highest paid kicker. And I think we all can agree that's a very well-deserved extension and a weapon unto itself from 65 yards out plus. We can get 3 points out of it. So, that's another weapon that, you say kicker's not a big deal, but the amount of games that Justin Tucker has won them over the years is fairly remarkable. It's just remarkable.
And not only that, too, in my eyes, and I've only been alive for 26 going on 27 years in a couple of weeks. I do not know of a better kicker than Justin Tucker. Seriously. And, you look at other kickers and, not really one has wowed. We saw for a little bit Greg Zuerlein was pretty good, just
Venturi, and he was great for New England, but over the course of his career, Tucker's just been as sure could be. There's you can make an argument that there's no other any other team in the NFL would step over hot coals to have him as their kicker. And he made me lose my voice for a week after that Lions game where he hit the NFL record breaker. So he's a special type of guy, and I'm glad he's staying for the next 4 years. He should be a Raven. He'll have a statue at M&T Bank Stadium, I think, when it's all said and done.
I would have to probably agree with you there. Ladies and gentlemen, Josh Adams, founder and managing editor of NCAA College Hoops Digest, now known and also part of the House Enterprise brand, with our good friend Jake Zimmer as well. Josh, thank you so much for coming on here again, brother. I truly appreciate it. And of course, Seton Hall basketball, so close away, but we know for a fact that you will be on here talking about Orioles baseball. Football
Guys, we're not going anywhere. Come on, we got to have another MLB one to run down here soon. They're just not going anywhere. There's
no doubt, and I can't wait to see what Baltimore does down the stretch. It should be tons of fun. Thank you so much, Josh. I appreciate you coming on.
Anytime, Joey, anytime, Mike. It's not your fault. You're not an a-hole. Don't worry about it. These things happen. It's not a big deal. I got nowhere else to be, I'm just sitting here in my basement. So, hey, late, never, whatever. I'm good with it, Joey. Don't worry. I won't hold it against either of you.
Oh, man, Josh, thank you, man. We'll talk soon, okay?
All right. Sounds good, guys. Take care. Thanks again. Appreciate it.
All right. Well, it has been a fun time here, Mike. And, we got a chance to learn so much about these teams. And, I think Baltimore, I'll be honest with you, this is our last thought before we go into our kudos is that, I think personally Baltimore, and I was serious about going downstairs and really placing a bet on them to win the AFC North. I'm dead serious. I don't even know what their value is, but I think Cincinnati last year, flash in the pan, to be quite honest with you. Yeah, they made it to the Super Bowl. But I think with Baltimore's returning pieces, they could really make a run they could make a run at that AFC North crowd.
I mean, it's easy to make that prediction really, because of course, with all the injuries, they still went 8-9 and in such a really impressive division and an impressive conference and whatnot, still being able to achieve that. You expect if they're able to keep a clean bill of health that they can be a lot better this year, and they certainly can win that AFC North crown and certainly make some noise in the playoffs, because certainly, as speaking to what Josh said, Jackson has a lot to prove. Lamar Jackson has a lot to prove this year, not because of the fact, only because of the fact that he's on a walk year in terms of his contract, but you also feel like just because of with all the injuries to a certain extent, everybody maybe forgot about the Baltimore Ravens because of all the injuries, the loaded AFC conference in general with all its fantastic young talent and young quarterbacks and whatnot. Maybe some people sort of forgot the Baltimore Ravens amid last year's disappointing campaign, and Lamar Jackson and company, they're fully healthy, might make some noise again.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially too, since, as we did say, Cincinnati did win the AFC. I don't think that will happen again. And that's not, that's not any bias or anything with anything. I truly believe that what we saw last year with Cincinnati, they can definitely replicate something there. I don't see them going again for a Super Bowl run. I simply do not see it.
I think that's going to be the case with a lot of the AFC teams, because there's just so much parity. I don't think you're really going to see. We thought a couple of years ago that we're going to see this Tom Brady level dominance from Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs. But now we see, that's definitely not going to be the case. You got beat in the AFC Championship by Cincinnati, and you see all the great young talent nearly got beat by Josh Allen and the Bills. Certainly they're going to be coming, and you feel like their time is going to be coming and whatnot. Of course, what happens with the Browns, of course, there's so much certainty. Do they come up and make some noise as well? So there's certainly a bunch of teams loaded in that AFC that, there's 5 or 6 teams that, you really think are going to be really strong. The Titans are always in there just because they always seem to control and dominate the AFC South, but then maybe really don't woo in the playoffs. Who knows? Maybe it's their time. It feels like you're always going to find this sort of shuffling in the AFC conference. So maybe the Bengals are not going to be there this year. They're there next year. There's so much parity really in the AFC with how loaded and how young it is. I think that's going to be the case for a lot of teams.
Yeah, and of course, going back to the NFC North, something, Mike, we did not show on here about from what Al said. Of course, our good friend Al Call from the Essential Wrestling Podcast, he says, quote, "I can't wait to come on week 4 to talk about how the Lions are the best 0-3 team in football." And then he said, and then again, week 7 with how the Lions are the best 0-6 team in football.
No faith in Dan Campbell, I guess. Raging Dan Campbell is going to, rip out your spine and, go get them and, go get the win and whatnot.
Oh my goodness. That is something else. But ladies and gentlemen, of course, we did say on Thursday, we will be having a special instant reaction with Jeremy Reisman. It will be It will be a primetime rundown segment, but it'll be a shortened segment because we wanted to get him on tonight. He was unavailable tonight, but we cannot thank Jeremy Reisman enough for being able to move a few things around on his schedule to be able to accommodate us on Thursday. And the same thing goes for a lot of the folks that we will be having on for our roundtables, Mike, this entire preseason, because listen, the primetime rundown, we are making strides here. Episode 94, we're 6 weeks away from having episode 100, and we're getting writers on left and right, broadcasters on left and right. Let's keep on moving forward. Mike, let's go to our kudos. We didn't really have any time to air out your grievances because there really were no grievances here today. But you do have a kudos. Unfortunately, I could not get the video, but I'm sure you can definitely describe it by pretty much going like this. Actually, this is pretty close. So go ahead. So give us your kudos.
Yeah, I mean, that was a perfect lead-in right there. My kudo this week goes, of course, to Lionel Messi. Fantastic soccer player, of course, that we all know over now in Paris Saint-Germain. Produced a fantastic goal in the season, and for a fantastic career he's already had. A great first career bicycle kick goal that, of course, we don't have the video, but I mean, just a fantastic ball laid into him in the box, and fantastic overhead kick, could pass the goalie into the corner of the net. Just a really fantastic strike. If you haven't seen it, go look it up on social media. It was a really great strike there in the PSG's 5-0 win to start off their new league season. Really good stuff there from Lionel Messi, who, of course, moved from Barcelona last year. Didn't really have such a great year over in Paris. Not really. We thought he would retire over in Barcelona. See how the veteran star, wonderful, phenomenal striker will be this year.
So my kudos goes to the Golden Auction team. And the reason why I go to them is because there was a privately held auction for one of the 1909 T206 baseball cards from the tobacco products from many, many years ago, from over 100 years ago, Mike. And the Mona Lisa of baseball cards. I think that might actually be the best way to put this baseball card of Honus Wagner. There's only 60 ever made. 60 baseball cards of Honus Wagner ever made in a tobacco product. And for those that do not know the story, is that Honus Wagner had his face on a baseball card, and he didn't want to promote smoking to children, which is fantastic, especially in 1909. Not a lot of people knew about the dangers of smoking. So Honus Wagner removed it, and there was only 60 ever to be made. And there's a few that are in mint condition, and clearly there was one that sold for a record, which goes for every single baseball card, football card, whatever it is, Mike Szabo, a whopping $7.25 million for this baseball card. $7.25 million. And there is also another baseball card that is awfully close. A 1952 Topps Mickey Mantle rookie card that could potentially fetch up to $8 million.
Wow.
Crazy, the business with baseball cards. But most notably, though, Mike, seeing this Honus Wagner baseball card, we've known for as long as you've been alive, for sure, and as long as I've been alive, this baseball card is the holy grail of sports.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a really well-designed card just in general. And listen, I don't know what's the point of some of the people who throw out all the millions of dollars for a card, but certainly the ones who are taking in the money are really happy about it. But I mean, it's just such a greatly designed card, and I mean, you keep on. I mean, us here as neutrals would have loved to have one of those cards, so we're reeling in that money, but. It's just really great to see these cards really maybe start breaking more records. Mickey Mantle's card will probably break some records. I can't wait to see in 20 years what Derek Jeter's card is going to be worth, whoever will have that. So really interesting stuff there.
Yeah, cannot wait to see what goes on there with the Mickey Mantle card, 1952. Really crazy stuff. But ladies and gentlemen, let us continue For tomorrow, the Essential Wrestling Podcast episode number 113 will come to you live beginning at 5 p.m. Eastern Time right here on the Eastern Observer. Join our guys Al Carl and John DeConnie, John Smith, and Gary Mehefe for all things wrestling presented to you by ProWrestlingPick'em.com. Again, all that can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Odyssey, and YouTube. Also, ladies and gentlemen, keep in mind to please subscribe to our show, The Primetime Rundown, by searching, of course, the title on the following platforms: Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and of course, the aforementioned Odyssey. Or if you'd like to see our beautiful faces, please search the Eastern Observer on YouTube at pretty much any point. And of course, Mike, we only have a couple of summer shows left. It's truly remarkable how fast summer is going. It's almost over. There's only two more summers to go. Summers to go. There's only two more summer shows to go. And then we return to Fridays at 7 p.m. on September 9th. It's amazing. It really is how fast time goes.
Yeah, it's crazy that it's already August. We've been talking about this, how it's crazy that we're already getting into football previews. It's almost deep into August now. I mean, it's just unbelievable how fast the summer is going. Just it's almost like as soon as you anticipate it being here, it's already gone, and we're already talking fall and college basketball and putting on sweaters.
Yeah, there's no doubt, and I can tell you this. Sweaters are no good. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, one more time, Jeremy Reisman will be with us. Detroit Lions. He covers the Detroit Lions. That will be a special on Thursday, August 11th at 6 p.m. right here on the Eastern Observer. And, of course, next week we will be covering the AFC and NFC South. So that should be a ton of fun. And, it's going to be a fun fall for us here at the Eastern Observer and also for the Primetime Rundown. Ladies and gentlemen, of course, one last time for Mike Szabo, our guests, Jeff Berkes, Arif Hassan, Mac Robinson, Josh Adams, of course, my co-host Mike Szabo, and our very own Ian Schraier, who is on extended leave. We can finally say it. He is on paternity leave, so he'll be back with us later on, probably in the year. And I'm Joey Jarzynka, ladies and gentlemen. For all of us here from the Eastern Observer and the Blackjack Media Group, we will see you all on Thursday for our Detroit Lions special and episode number 95 next Monday night. We will see you next time.